welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course, that makes this episode 50, the big 50 of the PlayStation podcast, the Circles and Squares podcast. And yeah, Kate, welcome. It's episode 50. Can you believe we made it to this giant milestone?
Yeah. Oh my god. It felt like it snuck up so fast. We were at like 48 not so long ago.
Almost like 1 month ago, we were at 48, and
Yeah.
now it's 50. It's crazy how
Now it's
numbers work.
50. Oh, I can't believe it. I didn't know I
Seriously,
could
though.
count this high, but here we are.
I feel like we've had a lot of episodes like this where it's like, we did the first few, we got to 10, we got to 25 was kind of the next one. And now like 50 is like the last real milestone before, I guess, 100, right? And that's going to be a long
Mhm.
ways away. So we got long way to go before we get there. Yeah, it's pretty surreal to look back and be like, man, we've created a lot of stuff. And that's not including like the news show, the extra content.
Mhm.
Man, we're talking to mics a lot these days. It's fun though. That's what it is. It's just fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking to Mike's, our Mike. So every now and again, we get our friend Mike on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So shout out for Mike. Maybe he's got to come back for some Elden Ring.
Exactly. Oh,
You
he'll
never
be back
know.
for Elden Ring. Don't you guys worry.
Mhm.
That'll be in a few episodes though, because we this game's not out yet, but we got some other stuff to talk about today. So let's get right into it for our 50th episode. We got an interesting show today. We got, of course, the games we've been playing for the first part of the show. And for the second half, we are expanding the listener mail segment to be the entire second half of the show, where we have a great submission about gaming trends from our friend Jeevan, who I guess will have used a pen name of some kind, which we'll read out later on. So we're looking forward to talking about that in the second half of the show. And if you want to be cool like Jeevan, just off the top and send us some listener mail questions or comments or stories, we always ask you guys, but again, our email address, circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com, or find us on Twitter at the links below, or wherever you're listening to this as well. Get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you if you enjoy our content. But yeah, Kate, why don't you start us off with talking about something a little unorthodox for the show? But, we talked about Oh Hi a few episodes ago, and that was
We did.
actually, I mean, you enlightened me to one of my favorite things on mobile right now. So, of course, I've heard of Wordle before, but I actually am like the only person that's never really played it. So I'm really interested to hear. Wordle.
Right. So yeah, I'm here to spread the good Wordle to you today. And you can join my Wordle cult as I've lovingly adopted the moniker of our Wordle cult leader in life. And this game has absolutely taken over my life
You
in
and a
the
lot of
best
other
way
people. I
possible.
see all the time. It's like people
Oh,
posting their Wordles on Twitter and
absolutely.
everywhere.
Wordle is no joke. It is a lifestyle at this point. So maybe I'll tell you about Wordle, and then I'll tell you about how much of a milestone this has been for me in my life. So, basically, you played Mastermind, right? Like, that's
Sure.
always the best way to describe this game, is it's essentially Mastermind, but you're using letters and words instead of, I think, numbers is traditionally how that goes.
Or colors, I think.
So
Mastermind is
or
colors too.
colors. Yeah, so how it works is every single day, and what makes Wordle special is it's only a once a day thing. You can't out over Wordle yourself. You can't get burnt out on the Wordle. It is exclusive and therefore special. But every day it's one word. Everybody gets the exact same word. So it's not unique to you. That's also part of the fun, is because you're all guessing the same thing. And you have 6 guesses to correctly identify a 5-letter word. You think about it on little boxes with a grid,
The green and
5
yellow
by
boxes.
5 by 6, exactly. So, it's just blank at the start, you've got nothing to go on, no hints, you gotta guess a 5-letter word. Now, as a small tangent, people have figured out on the internet, like, the most optimal words to guess that have the best combination of the most frequent letters, and I say that's not fun. I say you gotta pick a word that's relevant to your day or is, like, someone who's already done it gives you a funny little hint or something cute like that, and you gotta really just Wordle's about your intuition and your
It's
heart
not about
more than
min-maxing,
anything.
right? You can't
No,
min-max
you don't
Wordle. You
wanna
gotta play with the heart.
don't take the fun out of Wordle. Like, I started with the word squid yesterday because I thought that it really could be squid, and it wasn't. Um, but I'll defend that word till the day I die. And so, anyway, you do your first word, and then this is where the magic starts to happen. The boxes with your letters will flip over, and it will reveal to you some colors. And if you get a black, or I guess black or white, depends on if you're playing in dark mode. But for me, it's black because dark mode is king. And
Of course.
if it's black, that means that letter is not present. in the word. If it is yellow, it means that that letter does exist somewhere in the word, but it's not in the position you've put it. And if it's green, that means you've got a correct letter in a correct spot. So now you have to guess another word to continue getting information until eventually you have a perfect green across the line and you've successfully wordled. So
Wow, you know what?
it's
That sounds simple, but I bet it's really not.
it's so simple, but there's a lot of strategy to it because it's you only get so much information, right? And sometimes your first word is fantastic and you have like 2 or 3 letters to work with. And sometimes you guess your first letter and it's literally nothing. And then you're up to your own devices.
Right,
So,
which I guess is probably why people have figured out like those optimal words, right?
yeah,
If
but
you want
and
to play
it's
that way.
not if you wanna play away, but at the same time, it's not. Like, you can use a rise, and that's a great word because it's got a couple vowels, and R and S are very common. But, like, the word the other day was dodge, and, like, that doesn't help you at all with dodge, really. I guess you get the E, but, like,
Mhm.
like, there's an element, I guess, of luck to
Right, you're
it,
just playing your
but I
chances more or less with using words
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
But I think my favorite part about it is, like, it changes every day and you get put in these situations. My favorite thing about Wordle is I always do unless I get a really lucky first guess, I'll usually do 2 guesses with unique letters. That way I've got, like, 10 letters to work with and I've really narrowed it down. And then I feel like as long as I've narrowed some stuff down and I have, like, 2 or 3 letters, I can figure it out. And I will sit for 25 minutes if I have to, thinking and, like, man, as a linguistic
Like
student, it's just
anagramming in
so
your head.
yeah. As a linguistics student, it's just the best because I sit there and, like I've wordled on stream before for friends, and, like, I'll sit there and be like, "Okay, because I have this vowel, I think I need another vowel, but it's most likely gonna be this one because they go better together." And, like, based on the I in this last position, I think it's either a D or T it has to end with, and, like, I will play this this Wordle game to get it in 3 or 4 guesses.
Damn, that's commitment. So
It is
Wordle
commitment.
was recently bought by the New York Times, right? Are you going to subscribe to the New York
It
Times
has.
when it inevitably goes behind their paywall?
I don't think it will. I think
Oh,
everybody's
they have so
concerned.
many games behind a paywall with New York Times. I bet you it's a matter of time.
I don't know. I think it's such a fun trend right now that people are writing out. Maybe if it dies
Like
down
when
and
the
everyone's
trend
like
dies down, right? People aren't going to be playing
maybe
it
when the trend
forever.
dies down. I mean, we'll see. I really hope it doesn't because it's just such a shame. It's such a cute game and like what I've read before, whether or not this is true or just a cute internet story, what I've originally read is the person who made it, like, just one guy made it for either, like, his wife or his
Yeah,
girlfriend
that's
because
what I
she
heard
was, like
too.
she really liked word games, and so he made her one, and it's such a nice and cute story, and, like, I'm glad he sold it to New York Times because he probably made a shit ton of money,
Yeah, I think he
and,
made
like
like a seven-figure sum. They said I think the
yeah,
quote was like a low seven-figure sum, which is
yeah, and
like over $1 million.
I'm totally on board with that, like, he made a great thing, and he's set up for life, and that's awesome, but I do hope they don't, quote, unquote,
Hmm.
"ruin Wordle."
Hmm.
Probably I will buy it, so, my wordling goes deep. I'm gonna get a lot of judgment for this, but how I started wordling was, a good friend of mine who's also, very word oriented, and he's a big lover of language the same as me. Um, he told me about Wordle actually, and we started wordling, and we started kinda, friendly, competitive, and sort of making fun of each other if one of us took an extra guess, and it sort of just evolved into we have a spreadsheet. I can't believe I'm gonna admit to this, but we have a spreadsheet that we update every day. It's color coded, it's got formulas on it to, like, see, like, what our average or, like, median and mode and, like, how many Wordles we've ever completed, which is 34 at this point, and how many overall guesses we've done, like, what the most frequent letter that's
It's
been used
incredible.
is,
That's
and, like
incredible.
oh, it has evolved, like, it started out as, like, just a small thing, and we've just continuously been adding to our Wordle spreadsheet, and
You're
I
talking about being a linguistics person and getting really into Wordle. You're speaking my language as an organization person about like spreadsheets and color coding. Like that's my thing. And I'm like, yes,
Oh,
spreadsheet everything.
absolutely. I love our spreadsheet. Like, when I go into my Google Drive now, that's the first thing that Google Drive wants me to open, and it's like, depending on what time I go, it's like, "You open Wordle frequently around this time, which is midnight, because that's when the Wordle resets. So if I'm up at midnight, I do the Wordle. Otherwise, I do it, like, early in the morning, like, when I get to work or something. So, like, around those times, my Google Drive be like, "You open Wordle frequently at this time." And if it's not that time, it's just like, "You just look at this page a
Yeah,
lot. Would
yeah,
you like
right.
to open it?"
That's awesome.
So but you
Wow.
know what? It's fun, like, it's kinda silly and, like, yeah, whatever, it's, like, quote, unquote, "a trend," but at the same time, it's super fun. It's very social, like, shout out Jonah is, my Wordle buddy, and I adore him, and we do our Wordle, and we talk about it literally every single day, and we leave little comments in our spreadsheet, it's adorable. And then I've gotten, like, a bunch of other friends into it, so, like, I have a Discord chat that, like,
Yeah,
the
Wordle.
whole page is just Wordle, and it's just people posting their Wordles, and I go through and heart every single one of them to encourage them all, and, like, I've got another group chat with friends, and it's just Wordle posts, and, like,
God, your
it's
life's being
just
taken over right now.
it's
How have
been
you played
take
anything else?
but, I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? It's half an hour once a day, and I'm done.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
free for the rest of my day, and then I have something to look forward to.
It's flawless, really. Congratulations on finding
It is
Wordle.
flawless. So I honestly think, like, it's cute, and I get it's not for everybody, but
Mm.
if you have any interest in words or little fun little games like that or rituals or, like, just something fun that you wanna, like, have a little competition with someone about,
I
um,
should really take this up. I think I would enjoy it
yeah,
quite a bit.
try I'm gonna start sending you my Wordles and
You
you'll
should. Yeah, do. Get me into it.
But yeah, that's been probably one of my favorite games of all time, is now Wordle. But I do play real games I mean, not that Wordle is not a real game, but I do play, like, more traditional video games as well. I'm kind of in that awkward lead up to Elden Ring where I don't really wanna, like,
Yeah.
start too much or play anything too intense because, we are sitting it's the 20th as of recording, which means we're 5 days away, and I'm so excited. If there's reputations I have now, it's one for Wordle and one for FromSoft games. Like, I've been getting messages from people I don't speak to on a frequent basis
Because
at
of
all,
Elden Ring.
and, just, like, messages with no context, like, "Oh my god, are you excited?" And I know exactly what they're talking about, like, "Yes, it's coming." So I cannot even begin to describe how much of a little kid I feel like when it comes to my excitement for Elden Ring. Um, but with that in mind, I was thinking I want like a nice chill, cozy game that I can just play up until that. And so I started Cuphead because what's more relaxing than an intense bullet hell?
Exactly. Well, you know
So
what? It's you at least you chose something really fun.
I did choose something really fun. I'm having a blast. My cat loves it. I don't know if it's whatever the art style or he loves the music or what, but like Neville gets so excited. I've been putting it like HDMI from my computer to the TV and sitting on the couch and we've been playing it that way and he's just adoring it. So yeah, we've talked Cuphead before
Yeah,
and
I,
we'll probably talk more when I beat it. But
right.
I just wanted to give you
What
a
are your
heads up.
initial impressions though? Like how far are
Initial
you at?
impressions and heads up, so I have played Cuphead before,
Mm.
years ago, I mentioned, but I played it co-op, and so I've been playing it totally single player now, and oh my
So
god,
much
is
easier
playing
single
single
player,
player
right?
so much easier. Like, I don't even think the person I played with sucked, so there's not even that to rag on, but just, like, the amount of health increase and, like with the game with Cuphead, right, is, like, I find that I'll just die a bunch, and then I'll flawless the level.
Mm, mhm.
And so, like, it's about, like, just kind of learning and doing it over and over again until you get that, like, perfect run. But the problem with co-op is, like, you both need to have that perfect
Exactly.
run. You can't beat it if you have a perfect run, and, like, there's just so much health to go through if one person doesn't do well. And
Right.
so to combine, like, you both having a good run versus, like, just you having a good attempt is so much easier to play single player, I find.
Yeah, and because the game is more about like getting your hits in while you're keeping yourself alive, as opposed to
Yeah,
like the extra firepower of two people. Like you won't
yeah,
outlast the boss unless you prioritize keeping yourself alive first. I feel most of
yeah,
the time, and so that's what makes it so much easier single player. I
yeah.
totally agree. Yeah, I played a little bit co-op myself. Like I beat the whole thing single player too, but I played like co-op, a couple times just with friends, and yeah, it's dramatically more difficult.
Yes, like, I would love to go through a co-op because it's just a fun game, and, like, it's so cool that co-op is a function, but at the same time, like, I feel like it works really well just, like, a pass the controller back and forth as
Because
well.
you die so quick sometimes, right? You
Yeah,
take a couple hits
it's
and it's
so
just
fast.
you're back.
It's so fast. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying Cuphead. I mean, like, the presentation of this game is just flawless. Like, it is incredible. Like, I love the music, the sound design, like, the art. Like, I'm on the dragon boss right now
I like that
is
guy a
where
lot.
I'm
Yeah.
stuck.
I think
I'm
he was the first real like challenge boss. You know, like not that any of
yeah.
them are easy, but he's the first one. I had the same thing where I was like, whoa, I actually have to do this a few more times than anything
Yes.
previous. Yeah.
That's where I've gotten, and I think this fight is so interesting because you've kind of gone through the quote unquote tutorial you've learned, and they keep introducing like new things to think about. And so with the dragon and also the bird, the cuckoo
Hmm.
clock bird, now you're worrying like about like what's behind you
Right.
more
Yeah. Yeah.
than what's in front a lot of the time. And I think that's really interesting because it took me a little bit to kind of like get that in frame and to, like, pay as much attention to the back of the screen as the front of the screen because it kinda keeps you on your toes, which is really interesting.
It does, yeah, especially the dragon too, because with the plane, at least, like with the cuckoo clock bird, you're in the plane, so it's kind of like that side scroller bullet hell. Like, you've played
Mhm.
games like that before, and sometimes it does
Yeah.
kind of come from the back. Whereas with the dragon, when you're on foot, that's when I feel like you don't really expect things to be coming from both sides as well, and that's what really trips you up. Yeah.
Mhm. So, yeah, and I love the dragon and just, like, the art too, like, he shoots those fireballs and, like, just the animation on how the fire comes down and the trail of smoke that goes behind them. Like, there's just so many good little details in this game that I just can't help but have this, like, big stupid grin on my face as I'm like, just noticing all these little things. So, I love it. I'm gonna beat the dragon probably later today, like,
I
I
hope
it's
so.
been on my mind. I realized though that I'm playing with weird imposed difficulty, and I don't want this dragon to be what kills that for me, but I haven't used the shop. Um,
What?
I just haven't gone to the shop yet. I kind of forgot that that was a thing. I was just sort of running through the levels, and, like, some of them were familiar to me, so I got through relatively quickly.
Yeah.
And it's starting to get pretty difficult now, and I'm thinking like, "Man, I don't seem to be doing a whole lot of damage."
Yeah, the different guns and different stuff is kind of the whole point.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
not the
kind of
whole
the whole
point, but I
point.
mean, you're supposed to use
But yeah, like,
them.
it's definitely an important part of the game, but I feel like I've come so far without going to the shop that I almost wanna see how far I can make it and just be really stubborn about
And
it. So, this dragon is kicking my ass with my little pea shooter. It's not a very good weapon.
you know what? I like the
Um,
pea shooter a lot, but it's just not so useful. Like, props to you if you're able to make it much further without the other guns, just because, I mean, the pea shooter is good for some things, but it's nice to have that alternate fire when you need to switch to something else, which is like
yeah.
the problem you're gonna run into because eventually you're dodging so much, it's like hard to line up the shots with the pea shooter as well.
Yes. Yes, I'm spending a lot of time not DPSing. When I am DPSing, I don't feel like, I feel like the dragon fight is taking so much longer than other fights did, and it's just, like I mean, it's only, like, a couple minutes, right? But
Yeah.
it feels really long, but I'm still enjoying it, and so I'm not gonna, like, force myself to keep playing this way, but I'm a little bit I've been known to be a little bit stubborn in games before,
Sure.
and I'm gonna see how far I can ride this out.
Well,
But
props
anyway,
to you.
Cuphead is incredible, like, I'm already sold enough that, like, the DLC is getting purchased at some point
Oh yeah,
when
no, I
it's
can't
out.
wait for that too. And the Cuphead show's out now too. I haven't watched that yet,
Yes!
but apparently
Oh
it's
my
pretty good.
god. I gotta watch it. So, yeah, we'll talk more Cuphead and see where it goes. So far, if I had to pick a favorite boss, I do really like this dragon.
Yeah.
The genie, I adored. It's probably one of maybe my favorite plane level. The circus boss or the
The
circus
circus
run and
boss.
gun level.
Oh,
The
right,
run and
right,
gun
right,
on the
yeah.
circus, I genuinely really enjoyed that one,
It
which
has like the
is
clown
funny
cars
'cause
coming out, right?
yeah, oh, no, not the clown car is coming out. There's 2, I guess. There's the one where, you have to you go on those, like, platforms and they're shooting the balls and they, like, knock the
Right. Yeah,
platforms
yeah.
down and you're, like, jumping around,
Yeah.
and you have to, like, parry off of the little like, to get higher up.
Right.
So, I think the running gun is always said as, like, the lesser interesting part of the game, and it is, but I still like them.
Yeah, I think there's a few later on that are a lot cooler than some of like the running guns are a little hit and miss to me. Whereas like
Mhm.
the bosses, there's very few where I think it wasn't enjoyable. And then to me, like some of my favorites are the plane levels. I love the
I
flying
love the
levels. I think
plane.
because it's something about being less restricted with your movement and being able to focus just on the dodging and like the bullet hell aspects rather than kind of doing that
Mhm.
and platforming. I just love that straight bullet hell and the way that it breaks up, like, because there's very few plane levels compared to the rest. So whenever
Mhm.
you get to one, you're like, oh hell yeah, this is a surprise. Like it's nice to be
Yeah.
back in the plane, and
It
like
is
you're always
nice.
hyped.
It is nice for a change, yeah. If I had to pick, yeah, my 3 favorites so far, probably I love this dragon. I loved the genie, and I really like the, like, dessert level.
The
I just
dessert
think that
level,
one's
yeah, yeah.
hilarious. So yeah, I'll keep playing Cuphead, I'll
Yeah,
get
keep
back
me
on
updated
that
for sure.
one.
I'm interested to see like how far do you make it with the pea shooter, because boy, I couldn't imagine playing with just the pea shooter.
Yeah, I
Same.
mean, like, I just sort of forgot, like, I got to the shop the first time, I was like, "I don't know what I want, like, I only have so much money, I can't
Hmm.
what if I don't know what I want yet, I'll just save it." And then I just kinda kept playing and forgot about the shop, and then I was on the cuckoo clock, and I'm like, "Oh, man, like, this is hard. Maybe I should buy something." I was like, "No, I can do it, I'm getting better." And then I went to the dragon, I was like, "Oh, shit, I really should
Yeah.
go to the
Well, the
shop."
the cuckoo clock is different though, because in the plane you can only use the pea shooter ever. There's no other
Oh,
guns.
you can't buy
So
plain
the
stuff.
plane is a
Okay.
little bit of a misleading level, yeah. That's the thing.
Okay.
But you know what, the next evolution would be like, okay, buy a second weapon, but you one of them always has to be the pea shooter, and then you just alternate the second weapon, you
Right,
know?
I could just be
Gotta
slightly
like
more
rank it up a
flexible.
little bit. Yeah.
But you know what my favorite part of the game so far is?
What's
It's
that?
the mausoleums.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Those
Those
little,
are
like,
fun too. Like
parry
the
ones.
those little challenges,
They're
like they get
so
pretty.
fun.
The last one when you make it to the kind of like end of the game is actually like pretty hard to keep them all away
Mhm.
too. Like they're no
Yeah,
joke.
I have found them relatively easy so
Yeah,
far, but I just think they're super cute, and if there's anything I love in video games, it's little, like, mini games that you get to play inside the main game, and it's a perfect one because the parry is a cool parry in this game.
it is,
So, big
and it
points
works
to
really well the
Cuphead
way
for
it like
parries.
restores your ultimate moves and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's nice too because it's often, like, risk reward.
Hmm.
Like, it's like, do you go like, you can dodge and that's probably safer, but if you can go for a parry and get it and then get out, then,
Well, sure.
like,
That's
it's
the whole
yeah,
thing. Yeah,
I love it,
cool.
I love it.
Maybe we'll do a bonus podcast on the Cuphead TV show at some point. Dude, that'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I gotta beat it first, don't wanna
Yeah.
spoil anything, Like, I don't
Well,
wanna know what Mugman's up to outside of the game,
man, yeah.
but
Cool.
then I'll
Well,
watch it.
we'll check in with Cuphead in the future. But for now, Kate, let me tell you about Rain on Your Parade, which is a fun little indie game, which I played on Game Pass over the last couple days. It's from Unbound Creations. And this is, you ever play, I talked about Donut County. I don't know if you ever went and played
Yeah,
that on the
I
podcast.
haven't, but I'm relatively familiar with it.
Gotcha. So I would liken this game a lot to that. Like it's kind of like a chill sort of puzzle game that's more focused on like, it's got some funny humor in there. I personally find it a little bit like hit and miss with the humor in this one, but it's very much like go from level to level. Like what's the gimmick? What are you trying to do? And in this game, you're playing as a cloud, and you're kind of everything's made out of cardboard, similar to like I guess a Paper Mario style kind of world, or like Unravel, or what's that game on PSP? Unravel, or not Unravel,
Um,
Tearaway, that's the other
okay, I
one.
was gonna say snipper
Not
clips?
Snipper, yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
yeah, you're going around and you're kind of in these different environments, and you've got different objectives to complete. So the game starts off, it's super simple, and it's like, okay, you push the A button to rain and you just fly around, and it's like, hey, there's some stuff in this garden, you got to rain on it and grow it. So you just fly around, like water the plants, everything grows, and it's all good. And it starts to escalate a little bit, like the levels start getting a bit silly, and it's like, we're at a school now, and you're gonna rain in everyone's backpack so their homework gets all wet, or like rain on the teachers so that they like get upset. And it just, you're kind of having a good time with that. And then later and later in the game, it just starts getting like really, really ridiculous, to where you're like changing what's in your cloud, so you can fly over top of like an acid pool, and your cloud turns from white to green, and then all of a sudden you're like acid rain, so you can burn like, do different stuff with that. Or you can fly over top of a coffee pot and you turn brown, and then you rain coffee into people's coffee mugs. So you're supposed to do that type of thing. And then in combination with the raining, you also start getting different powers. Like you eventually can zap lightning bolts from the sky. So if someone has an umbrella they're holding up, you can zap them, they'll drop it, and then you can rain on them, stuff like that. You also get like a hurricane power, where you can sort of suck things in, and it becomes almost like Katamari Damacy, where everything kind of like gets blended together and you're trying to like move things around. But they just have some interesting ways of combining all these different abilities that you get. And the levels, like, they're never super complicated to where you can't figure them out, or there's never like a time limit or a lot of sort of skill based stuff. There are a few levels, like story wise, there you have kind of a nemesis that's like Doctor Dry Spell, and he's trying to get rid of clouds and all this stuff.
No.
So he's trying to stop you, and you got to avoid him a little bit. But more on the in general, the game is more like, you know, interact with these cool sort of sandbox environments and get the laughs out of it, and light
Mhm.
puzzle solve more so than something really complicated. I found Donut County was probably a little bit more complicated than this,
Okay.
and like maybe a little bit more well written also. I think I prefer Donut County in general, but this is more of the same sort of premise if you're interested in that kind of stuff. But the game is, yeah, it's premise. The premise, I guess, is like this grandfather is telling a story about a cloud to his grandchild, and then that's where the levels and the inspiration comes from.
Mhm.
And the overworld, which you're going between level to level, is so it's very similar to Overcooked. How you're driving, like, instead of driving
Okay.
your bus along an overworld, you're flying your cloud over top, and then every level has the same like 3-star objective type of deal as the over
Right.
thing. So it's kind of a high score thing in that way too, but it's just like the whole presentation is really fun. I don't know if you had
That
a
is
question. I couldn't tell if you were
it is
trying to.
well, it's adorable. I was just gonna say, like, I hadn't heard about this game,
Yeah,
because I don't have Game Pass yet,
I think it's on
which is
Switch as
a
well.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, but, like, this is the perfect Game Pass game, right? Because it takes you, what, like, 3 or 4 hours to beat it?
yeah. It
And
took me like
so
3 hours, or yeah,
yeah,
thereabout.
exactly, and so it's the kinda thing where, like, you wouldn't necessarily be like, my $15 or $20 is best spent on Rain on Your Parade, and that's not a bash at the quality of the game, it's just that, like, games are expensive and we don't have the luxury of buying every single cute little thing that we see, right? But when it's on Game Pass, like, it is just the perfect thing to hop into as, like, a fun little palate cleanser or something relaxing to do for an evening,
Totally.
and, like, this game looks adorable. I love the art style, the cloud is cute, like, he's wearing hats sometimes, looks like
Yeah,
you can kinda customize him a bit.
there's customization if you get like 3 stars or the max score on whatever level, then you
Mhm.
can unlock different hats and stuff to put on them. So
Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot of
that's
stuff.
cute. The other thing I gotta say is how is the music? Because their trailer on Steam, at least the first one, has, like, a fun kind of almost electro swing kinda song going to it, and I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say it kind of keeps up that tone. I didn't. I mean, we talk about the soundtracks of games pretty often. I feel when we talk about them, I don't think this one stood out in the way where I'm like, wow, this is
Mm.
like, amazing soundtrack. I'm playing this game for that. But I mean, it fits the tone of the game. It's not. It doesn't get grating. It doesn't get repetitive. It's not annoying at all. I guess I don't know. I would say it's just kind of there personally, but if it's
Okay.
your kind of thing, like it's not like it detracts, and it's good enough for sure. And the thing is, like, the levels are relatively short, and the overworld has its own kind of music. So as you're going
Mhm.
through, you're never really listening to something for too long, and it kind of switches it up enough. And the different levels have different music as well, depending on the setting. Like sometimes you're in a city and you're outside. Other times you're in like the school building or the office building. And speaking of that, that's like the last thing I have to say about this game because it's relatively simple. Like, there's not a ton
Mhm.
to say about it, other than this game has some really interesting referential humor that I just was not expecting. Like, there's a few levels, and this is light spoilers, but again, it's the kind of spoilers that I feel is kind of enticing to tell people so they go
Yeah,
play.
it's spoiler
Yeah,
hooks.
is like, well, first of all, who cares about spoilers for a game like this? But second, like, there's actually like the office levels in this game. Like, some of the
Oh,
objectives,
like, from the show?
you're actually in the show. Like, the when you go into the level, that's the level I was saying. Like, you can absorb the coffee from the coffee
Mm,
maker. So the game was like, okay, fill everyone's coffee mug, and there's a few other things to do. But as you're flying around, it's like the layout from the office. Like, you come in the front door, and there's the couch and the reception desk and
mhm.
Michael's office, and there's this generic kind of looking dude that's sort of looks like Michael, and you go through to the lunchroom, and you can just see like, oh, that's, I think this is where like accounting sits over here. Like, you can
Yeah.
see these three people, and there's like a series of 3 levels that you do, and that the office has like the black screen at the top, the front, that says
Mhm.
like the office, and it's got
Yep.
like level cards kind of like that, and there's a 3 level set where you do that. So it was like, wow, this really came out of nowhere. I was not expecting the office to be in this game, but it was. And there's a
That
couple
is
other things like that
adorable.
too that I won't mention, There's a few just little references. There's like there's a Metal Gear Solid level where you're sneaking around and it's like they call you through a codec and stuff. And if you die, that's one of the few levels I did die on during the game. And they're like,
Mhm.
there's like snake, snake, and they have like a play on that happens if you die. So it's just like those little bits of delight, and the game is short enough to where you'll probably get through it all and see them all. So
Mhm.
it's I would recommend this for sure. Like if you have Game Pass, check it out, no doubt about it. And even for $15, I think it's worth it if you're interested. And if it goes on sale for like 10 or less, I think it's really a no-brainer if you just want to sit down for an evening, have a good time, and play some fun
Mhm.
little puzzle stuff. It's
Well,
good.
yeah. Yeah, that's cute. I mean, it's on the list, right? It just
Yeah.
we always know how that list goes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, one other thing too, I just realized before I
Mhm.
get into my next game, I had one other thing written down, which was just so funny. So I told you before, like the story is a grandfather talking to his grandchild, like bedtime story,
Mhm.
and the grandchild was like telling the grandfather that he was bullied at school, and a lot of the story is like the grandfather making up bullshit out of his ass to like get the kid to be satisfied with the story, like, oh, the story's not good
Mhm.
enough. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you the cloud can like use thunder and that's how you get your
Yeah.
new abilities. So he's trying to like, oh, maybe the cloud can do something about your bully, right? And
Mhm.
I thought like, oh, I'm gonna go like rain on the bully and ruin his day or something like that. But
Yeah.
the next mission was literally like birthday party, set all the presents on fire. So like there's a birthday party going on in a backyard and you like fill the cloud with oil and lead it from the barbecue over to the presents and like burn all his presents. Like, man, this
That's
really was
amazing.
like took this a little further than I thought. And that's kind of the moment when I noticed, okay, this game's going to be a bit more ridiculous than I thought. And it
Mhm. I
really
mean,
never
and
came
yeah,
back.
with that kind of premise, like, that's what makes it fun, right? Like, the
Yeah.
gameplay sounds like it is cute puzzle solving, but, like, the joy of that game is the novelty
Is
of,
the
like,
laughter,
just
right?
kinda how, like, outrageous it gets.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. Exactly. Speaking of outrageous, I played something else, and this was, of course, from PS Plus this month. I decided I was going
Mhm.
to play some UFC 4 because, I know it's not really for us. One of us had to bite the bullet here, and we got to
Yeah.
talk about the
You
PS
took one
Plus.
for the
So
team, so
I
thank
took one
you.
for the team, and I took a lot of punches for the team too, Kate, right to the face. I did not do so well in my experience playing UFC, but man, this game is so hard. There is an unbelievable amount of complexity to this, and I mean, I feel like also like I don't really understand UFC, like it's not my sport of choice, and I can see like knowing the rules of a sport and knowing kind of how it goes is just as important as knowing how to play the game, right?
Right, right.
And so I kind of struggle with that, and it's very fighting game adjacent. Like the controls, I imagine, like obviously UFC is it's a fighting sport, so it's gonna be somewhat adjacent, but to that. But the controls are very intuitive for their complexity. I just think they're the kind of thing you'd really have to spend a lot more time with to get used to than I had.
Right. Is it stuff like it's not like actual fighting game stuff where it's like you got a quarter circle forward and, like, not to that level?
No, not like that. So I actually wrote the controls down here because I think like I'm actually really blown away with how intuitive they are. So basically have like your face buttons are triangle and or square and triangle are your two punches with each fist, and then the same
Mhm.
for the kicks on X and circle. I think it's
Okay.
kind of similar to like a Tekken setup if I'm getting that right. For
Yeah.
those buttons anyway. And then you kind of have so those are for like body shots and body kicks and stuff. And then if you hold either L2 or L1, you can change it so you're aiming like at the legs or at the head of your opponent. And then depending
Oh,
if you
okay,
push those buttons, you can
that's
like kick them in the
unique.
head or like punch them in the head and vice versa.
Okay, that is quite unique because normally it's just, like, if you're, like, crouched, then that'll be low,
Right,
right?
right. I
Yeah.
think this game is like I use the word fighting game because it's UFC and fighting, but it's definitely like
Mhm.
not akin to any fighting game I played before. Like I enjoyed playing this actually significantly more than pretty much any fighting game I played before because it's more like simulation-y compared to those
Right.
games.
A bit
'Cause
more, like, easy to jump into as a
yeah.
new player.
Well, it's like an EA Sports thing, right? Like it's built for more of a I don't think it's necessarily casual is the right word because I think people get like really
Right.
hardcore into UFC and there's a lot of people that aren't like sports game people that get into this. But it's not the
Yeah.
same as like pulling off combos in a fighting game. It's much slower and more
Mhm.
methodical. And you can do stuff like if you hold R1, you get into like the grapples and there's a whole different control scheme that comes up that I didn't really get a chance to sort out where you're like choosing if you want to kind of try and choke them out or try to like pin them so you can punch them in the head on the ground or what
That
you're really
sounds
trying to
like
do. But
What's that YouTube video? It's like, "You gonna choke him out."
oh yeah, Bass Rudin,
Is
yeah.
that
Shout out
guy?
to Bass Rudin.
Bazaroon.
Bong, right
That's right.
straight.
Bong. You give him the bong bong.
Oh my god.
Oh,
Anyone that's not seen that,
I
look
like
up Bass
that.
Rudin on YouTube and you're gonna have a great
Bazaroon.
time. But then you're using the right stick, so your analog stick is kind of, you can weave in and out and kind of dodge like this. And then there's other stuff that sort of happens, like if you push, I think it's triangle and circle or square and X, you can do like uppercuts and this stuff. And so that's kind of the basics of how it works. But man, this game goes so hard at you, and it expects you to understand a lot of like how your stamina works and all these different, like there's meters, and I think they're kind of tracking the damage to like your head and your body and like different body
Hmm,
parts, because you're supposed to try and guard, right, of like different things. And you can
right.
do it goes into the kind of depth of like, you stand with whichever way you're standing, you either have your left or your right leg at the front. But then if you click down the right stick, you can choose your other leg will be your lead leg, kind of like switching your snowboard on like a snowboarding game.
Right, okay.
But you're trying to keep track of like, oh, my lead leg has taken a lot of damage, and they're going to be able to knock me over easier because I've, it's gotten weaker in
Mhm.
that way. And so you're constantly monitoring that kind of thing. And then also if your stamina, like the way the stamina works is not so much, it doesn't stop you from moving or throwing punches, but if your stamina gets low, like if you're throwing a lot of heavy punches, like I was a boxer, right? Like I
Mhm.
tried to prioritize and like stand up fighting because I didn't want to learn like all the wrestling
Yeah,
grappling stuff, but I was
fair
like
enough.
really just swinging for it. I was trying to knock this person out, and it was just, I got my stamina so low, and they were able to just like basically one shot me because I was exerting too much energy from my character.
Right.
And so there's a
You were
lot here.
exhausted.
There's really a lot here, and I
Huh.
and I honestly think this seems like a pretty cool game. And if NHL wasn't my sort of one sports preferred game of choice, I could actually see a world where I got into this. Um, Again, also if I didn't like playing so many different things and doing the podcast and trying to play enough to talk about different stuff. Like I definitely won't stay with this, but I could see a world where I would.
Mhm. That is really interesting. I'm impressed just hearing about this because, like, they're kind of, I don't know, they're always hit and miss for me, and, like, maybe it's super unfair, but the first place my mind went to when this game came out, I know it's like they're made by totally different developers, and they're, like, totally different things, in real life as well, but my mind went to, like, that WWE game we
Oh
played,
yeah, yeah,
which was
yeah.
hilarious and a ton of fun, but it was so bad.
It was
Like,
terrible.
it was terrible, and so, like, WWE is obviously not the same thing as UFC, don't hate me for saying that, um, but, like, I assumed a more, like, arcadey kind of thing, which is
Yeah.
obviously this is not.
No, this is like sim, and it starts off too, like the EA has been doing these kind of career modes for a while. Like I played the NFL one,
Yeah.
and it's kind of cool. Like the game starts off, and it's like it puts you in, the tutorial is basically like you make your character, and then you're kind of going through, and this guy's like, hey, I'm an injured fighter and I was going to do really well, but now you're in my new protege, and like he like welcomes you to your gym, and you're doing like training exercises, and then you get put in a fight, and
Mhm.
then training, and then put in a fight, and it's kind of like building up your career, right? And there's like skill points for your characters, you enter different matches and stuff. And so obviously you start off really low, and like the first couple fights in the game take place outside of like a gas station, and under this tent there's like a UFC ring. And I like got my ass beat 2 times outside of this gas station, even though I think I don't know, it's like the first fight, right? Like it should be pretty easy, but I
Mhm.
just got beat down by this girl. Like I made a girl character. I actually made Ash, made it look like her as best
Mhm.
I could. The character customization, not so great. It's hard to really make it look like you. I feel like a lot of it's because they have a lot of cosmetic damage they put on your characters. Like you really get
Okay.
like bloodied up throughout the different rounds of the fight. Like by the end of some of the fights, my gloves were like red and stained with blood, and my opponents, like their face was getting swollen and beaten in. Me too. So I feel like maybe that's affects the customization because they have to make it
Right, like, work
dynamic in
with
how
all
they
of
can
those.
work with the different
Yeah.
damage you get, but it still wasn't great. But anyway, I got my ass beat 2 times outside the gas station. And then I was sitting kind of in the training place. I'd done my next tutorial, and I had this guy, like he texted me on my phone in the game, and he was like, "Hey, there's a really good wrestler coming in, and like, you should take them on." And I was just like, "Oh God, like why not? Like high level
Oh,
opponent, sure, I'll
fuck.
take them on."
Okay.
And guess what? I ended up beating that person my third match. I feel like I'd
Oh,
kind of mastered the
wow.
controls a bit more. I'd gotten in there,
Mhm.
and they kept trying to take me to the floor, right? And I just was immediately trying to get up as best I could. I got up, but
Mhm.
because I was a boxer, I was able to beat them at the stand-up game. and
Right,
kinda
yeah, yeah.
and it went down to the decision, we went the max amount of rounds, but because I landed a lot of heavy blows to their head, somehow they didn't get knocked out. Like, this woman had, like, a skull of steel, like, she did not get knocked out, but I had her kinda on the ropes, and they ended up giving me the decision at the end. The guy lifted my
Mhm.
arm, and I was like, "Hell yeah, I beat someone," and that's kinda where I ended it for the night because I just wasn't about to, I was, like,
Yeah,
wanting to end on a
end on
high
a
note
victory, right?
and on a
Yeah,
victory, yeah.
absolutely.
But
Before you
anyway,
get
yeah.
concussed and end up in the hospital, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I was blown away. In the same way that we were disappointed by the WWE game, this is a legitimately good game, I think. And if you're a UFC fan, fighting game fan, like I'd say you could check it out. And if you can get past like kind of you know, the sports bro kind of sim aspects of what it is, the mechanics are actually really fun. Like if this game had the same mechanics, but it was skinned to be like, a video
Mhm.
game as opposed to like a sports game for you know whatever sports people, I feel like this would actually be received really well by like video game like gamers, instead of just people who are going to write it off for being UFC.
Yeah. That's interesting. I feel like out of all the sports games, this is by far the one I would
Hmm.
play if I was going to play one.
Yeah, no, I would recommend it. Like, I actually think you would enjoy it. I just think you would be put off by the trappings of the sports kind of setting.
Mhm.
Like Dana White showed up in there, like the UFC commissioner. He was like, "I'm gonna watch your fight," and luckily that's the one that I won because,
Oh,
you know,
good. You wanna
yeah,
impress him for sure. You don't want that guy watching you get beat up behind a gas station.
that's right. Yeah. Anyway, that's UFC and that's PS Plus for the month. So not that it was bad, but let's hope for some more stuff that we're super interested in next month. But yeah, that's what we've been playing. Of course, we've been playing a lot more in the background. I'm going to be talking about Persona Strikers next episode.
Mhm.
I've been trying so hard to beat that game in time for
I
this
know,
episode. Uh,
I keep seeing it pop up on,
yeah,
when you're spying on your friends a little bit, like,
that's right.
"Ooh, Persona."
That's right. Yeah, I've been on there. It's been enjoyable. I'm going to definitely finish it. I'm like right at the end. I just wasn't able to get it done.
Yeah.
And I know you've been
That's
playing a lot
okay.
of stuff too.
I have been. Yeah, Elden Ring is gonna be the big hotness for the next 3 months, but, I've been playing a lot of Detroit Become Human, and genuinely, I wanna wait till I finish this game to talk
Hmm.
about it because
Especially a game
there's
like
just
that.
so much to unpack. But genuinely, like, it's at least top 10 best games for me, maybe top
Wow.
5. I've absolutely fallen in love with this game.
Awesome. Wow.
Um,
We'll have to
so
talk about that
that
for sure because
that's
that's one I've
soon.
beaten too, and that would be fun to go in depth on that for sure. But for now, Kate, why don't we move into the second half of today's show, which is an extended listener mail segment because we had an interesting set of questions written in by a good friend, Jeevan, who goes under some pen names. But you know what, Jeevan, if you're going to make us read some ridiculous names and all these weird things out on the show, then you get to be called out by your real name. So there you go, my friend. And he wrote in a really good question. So, like we said at the top of the show about gaming trends, and I don't know if you have it there ready to read out for our fine listeners.
I have it here. I am not ready to read this out. Jeevan. He says, "Happy, happy, cirky squares," and then he's put an ooh, which that's a choice. And he wants to know what is our least favorite gaming trend in the last 5 years.
Oh
And
man,
that comes oh, I'm sorry, that doesn't come from Jeevan. It comes from Robert Jackson Esquire, no spaces,
Robert
in that
Jackson. I
name.
wonder what his last name is. Hard to tell.
I don't know, Robert Jackson
Or his
Esquire,
title.
first name.
Yeah, perfect. Anyway, thank you for the
Um,
question, G. It's a good question, right? Last 5 years,
it is a good
gaming trends, and
question.
we decided to modify it a little bit just because it's hard to be like I don't like to be negative Nancy's. We get a lot of questions written in like, oh, what's the worst game mechanic? What's the worst game trend? We
Yeah,
like to
and
throw a
it
little bit
is
of
fun to
positivity on
talk
there.
about the
Yeah.
bad stuff, but it's also nice to, like, end on a good note,
Yeah,
so
nice to mix it up, and so I guess it's just going to be a springboard into like a bigger
yeah.
conversation of just gaming trends in general. So I don't know where you want to start, Kate. Do you have like a glaring trend that you came up with, or do you want me to go first? What do you feel?
Yeah, I can point out one maybe before because this is not a game specifically. This is more gaming industry. So maybe
Hmm.
just to get this out of the way, I'm concerned about these nesting companies and everything
Yeah,
being scooped up as the
right.
first place my mind went. And we've just had
Very pertinent too.
acquisition. Yeah, just acquisition after acquisition lately, and like that's not always a horror story, right? And in isolated situations, that can be really positive. But I'm just concerned at the overall trend of like studios becoming less and less independent and everything becoming some kind of, like, competition
Hmm.
between 2 companies that are just trying to get as much under their belt as possible, so
Yeah, I agree with you too. Like, I think consolidation is just it's not a healthy thing for pretty much any industry, right? Because I think it
yeah.
takes away that competition. And although there might be competition between like I guess it's Xbox and PlayStation, right? And I guess like Nintendo too,
Mhm.
obviously, but I feel like still having like two mega corporations where they eventually if they were to own like all these different studios, it just feeds that like picking sides thing where it's like, oh, PlayStation's so good,
Mhm.
Xbox sucks. No, Xbox is the best, PlayStation sucks, and like everyone has to fight about it.
Yeah, and it ends up yeah, it ends up creating a lot of conflict and ends up not being consumer friendly, right? Because it's
Hmm.
like, well, these games are exclusively on systems, and I think there's nothing wrong with exclusives, like, I understand why they exist, but it's different when it's, like, first party studios that are making the
Hmm.
exclusives versus, like, we're buying all the big third party studios, and now they're becoming first party studios, and
Right.
just kind of getting rid of that, like, middle ground that exists outside of the big companies, and
Hmm.
so, I mean,
Hmm.
we're not there yet, there's tons of amazing indie studios, and there's tons of studios that are still independent,
Yeah, and there's
but,
lots of
like
times too, like there's lots of examples of people leaving big studios to make their
yeah,
own. Like I think we saw with in Far Axis Studio or something. There was a story earlier in the year, like some people from Bungie I think had left and like made their own, which
mhm.
ironically now PlayStation owns Bungie, but like before they had left, and I think they were being funded by PlayStation for that multiplayer game we like read a story about, and so I guess
Mhm,
there's stuff like that too. But I mean, yeah, in general, I think it's something to be worried about like long term, you know, like in the short term it's like
mhm.
wow, you know, Bethesda was bought by Microsoft, this is great, I get all these games on Game Pass for no increased price, and
Yeah.
like that type of thing is really consumer friendly. But I think, you know, 5 more years down the road and all of a sudden it's like, well, now they've increased the price of Game Pass and there's only a tier where if you're going to play the first party stuff you have to pay more, and then you're only getting
Mhm.
so much, and but all of it is gated off because Microsoft bought all these companies and now you have to buy this, you know, you can only get it from this one place, and it's a slippery slope, which I, you know,
Yeah.
it's hard to say how it'll turn out, and you hope it turns out to be good, but it's just, yeah, having everything owned by one person, it's not so good. It's the reason our like cell phone prices are so high, you know, like one
Yeah,
of three companies we
exactly.
can only get our contracts from and stuff.
Yeah, and our car insurance is just, like, an absolute
Oh god,
abomination.
don't
Shout out to
start.
anyone who lives in Vancouver. We're dying
Oh my
over
god, I
here,
gotta
please
renew
help
next
us.
month, fuck me. Kill me now, kill me now. Yeah, that's a I like that trend though. That's one I was gonna write down too. Like I feel like a lot of
Mhm,
mine are actually industry stuff similar to yours, and whatnot as well. Like for me, I guess one of the bad industry trends that I wrote down, if we're gonna start off with some negative stuff, is like I really don't like the way that games are being monetized these days, and like the trend. There's a couple different trends here, right? Like one of them is free to play. One of them is the way we're being conditioned by like Steam and all these things of like I don't buy a game unless it's $10 or less and on sale, even if it's regularly
mhm,
like full price. And it's like everyone's just waiting for like this dirt cheap price to where, you know, things are, and it's a complicated issue, right? Because games are so expensive,
mhm,
and like I'm a regular dude, I can't afford to be buying everything at $80 a pop. Like it's better part of $100 here to buy a new game, and it's
mhm,
tough because I mean there's a lot of stuff, like games really haven't gone up in price that much over the last 10 years. You could probably argue for the development costs and stuff that they should cost more based on how much resources are being put into making them, and then it gets into this whole thing of like, yeah, well, if they just, you know, distributed the wealth of the profits towards all the people at the company, then they wouldn't have to increase the price and all this stuff. But in general, I just feel like getting moving away from like the top end and how complaining about like the price because it is expensive, but on the low end I feel like free to play leads to a bunch of microtransactions which people don't like, and it's great to be able to play something for free, but then like if you're not going to pay in towards it, I think the problem is it gets ended up being funded by like the few people that are putting like hundreds and hundreds of dollars in, and so they're getting those people to basically fund like the whole thing. But then I guess I don't know, I'm all over the place, right? But then when it comes down to like the Steam pricing, it's like, you know, oh, I really want to play that game, but I'm going to wait 2 years until it's 75% off and get it for $10. And I think it's dangerous because we're getting trained to only want to pay the dirt cheap price, but development's only getting to cost more. And maybe that's the crux of my argument, right?
yes.
And so I
So
think there's a
there's a
disconnect where it's going to be like
disconnect.
eventually, well, how are we going to monetize this? Because if games are costing more to make, but people are getting conditioned that Steam will give you stuff for cheaper and cheaper, then how is that going to shake out in the long term? Like that's a trend that's concerning to me, right? Like I think we should meet in the middle where it's like maybe people should be more likely like, oh, this is worth $50, like this game is
Mhm.
worth buying at this price because I want to show the developers like I want this from them. But then maybe it should be like, well, you know, hand us a few more DLCs for free or something, like we already bought your game, like maybe put
Mhm.
those out. I don't know how it would work out, but I just think people need to be a little bit more reasonable with like what they're expecting games to be priced at.
Yeah, and it's a really sticky situation, and it's difficult, and, like, it's one of those things where, like, it is kinda sometimes difficult to justify buying the $80 game
Totally,
because,
yeah.
like, I can buy this $20 game that I've been wanting to play for 2 years anyway, and, like,
Totally.
it is tough. I think what it comes down to, at least for me, is, like, it's how much do I wanna play this right now?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when there's a game and it's like, I know I'm playing 6 other things, like, I don't need to buy like, I almost bought Guardians of the Galaxy the other day because it was on a sale, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, man, like, I
Yeah.
really wanna play Guardians of the Galaxy, it's on sale for, like, $50, like, I wanna get this, like, it's a sale, I should buy it," and, like, my dumb lizard brain was like, "Oh, sale is good, buy on sale." Then I thought to myself, like, "When the hell am I gonna play Guardians of the Galaxy? It's just gonna sit in my, like, library for a while,
Yeah.
and I might as well just buy it later when I want to, either it'll go on the same sale or like,
Well,
whatever, right? Like, I'll take that gamble. It
exactly.
might be a better sale, and so I didn't buy it. But, like, it is very much like sale, 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 and they're smart about knowing how to
Totally,
put the
right?
sales out and when, right? And, but at the same time, like, yeah, I bought Elden Ring, like,
Yeah.
I'll pay full price for Elden Ring, that's fine, and I think it just depends on, like, do I get this much enjoyment out of it? That's what it
Right.
comes down to for me, like, would I have gotten $50 enjoyment out of Guardian of the Galaxy? Most likely, absolutely, like, am I gonna get my $80 enjoyment out of Elden Ring? Like, 10 times over, absolutely, and if that means FromSoft is making more games because we all bought Elden Ring, like, I'm stoked, but I you can't not every game fulfills that,
Well,
like,
that's the
it
thing,
was
right?
worth it,
And
right?
definitely it's like I'm not saying don't go for sales. Like obviously, especially too,
Mhm.
like your point's a really good one. Like if you don't have time to play something, you're obviously not gonna like I'm not gonna run out and go buy a game for $80 when I'm playing three other things and I don't have time to play it. But I think like there's a lot of people that will be like, "Oh man, I can't wait to play Elden Ring, but I'm gonna play it next year when it's on sale for $50 off." And like if
Mhm.
you're really that interested in it, like once in a while, just fucking spend, just buy it, like just show the companies that that's what you want in a way. I feel similar to like don't buy games if you're not interested.
Yeah,
But
that is the flip to the argument, is there's also a lot of games that are like, like the Pokemon controversy with the
mhm.
Legends Arceus, I know a lot of people are enjoying it, and that's great, but the
Yeah,
build up to is like, "Oh, yeah, this game looks not great, but it looks good for a Pokemon game." And
sure.
like, what do you mean good for a Pokemon game? Like $80 is like good enough? Like,
Man, you know what? I want to
ugh.
have a whole big discussion on this because I have a lot of I don't know, we have a lot to say about Pokemon, I guess,
We have a
but
lot to say about
yeah.
Pokemon, but that's what I mean, like, some people will just, like, the flip, and they'll just, like,
Yeah,
pay $80 without even, like, knowing anything about the game
right.
because it is, like, it's got a name to it or something,
Right,
right?
right, right.
And then so that's funny on the flip, like, "Oh, I can't wait to play this game, but I gotta wait 2 years for a sale,"
Yeah,
so
it's the whole, like,
you
pre-order
get both
thing versus
sides.
that, yeah, 100%, yeah, it's an interesting argument, and it's, like, there's so many details, like you said, about it, like, everyone's in their own situation. I know some people that just buy, like, every new game that comes out and play, like, 2 hours of it and then never touch it again, and, like, that's a huge waste. Like, how are
Yeah, that is
you
a luxury I do not have.
I know, oh god, yeah, I wish. God, anyway,
Um
yeah, that's a big one for sure. I don't know, like, what else you have to jump off of that or anything like that, but, I mean, I've got a few more we can
yeah, if
we
you've
can
got
get
some more
into.
industry stuff,
Sure,
because I think the
yeah.
rest of my stuff is, more, like, in-game, so
Sure, yeah, I
we can
mean,
do
I've
the industry side
I
first.
only have, like, 2 that are in-game stuff. I think a lot of them are negative. Let me get a few negatives out. Maybe we'll end on the
Okay.
positive ones at the end.
Okay, that seems good.
Okay, so this is probably one of my biggest pet peeves of all when it comes to video games is look, it kinda ties into the money stuff too, and I really think it's a negative trend and, like, really unhealthy for the industry that people judge value of a game like their number one criteria if a game is worth a certain amount of money is length of the game. And I used to be
Yes.
I used to be very much like that in terms of like, oh, if I used to have this rule where it was like, went back when you're, younger and don't have as much disposable income and whatever. And it's like, okay, if I spend $60 on this game, I have to get 60 hours worth of entertainment out of it.
Right, a
And
dollar
it's like a
for
dollar an hour
yeah,
because
that's
and
all,
I
yeah.
likened it to like, well, games are a much better deal than movies because a movie you
Yep.
spend $15 and it's like 2 hours long, whereas a game you can get like an hour per play, right? And the longer I've thought about that, I can't have reversed my stance on that really any more than I have. And I just think of games like, these big Assassin's Creed that's come out and it's like 200 hours long if you do all the side quests and like and there's a lot of games that come out too. Like I just played Dragon Quest 11 and like that was a long RPG. And it's like a lot of these games get padded out because they can write on the back of the box that's like, oh, 120 hours worth of gameplay. And I mean, I get it. Like if you're the kind of person that buys a console and you play like your 2 or 3 games a year and you want these kind of experiences to be so long like this, like that's great, but by and large, like there's a lot of games where I feel like this would actually have been better if it was 5 hours shorter and a more tight experience. And I think of some of my favorite games from last year, like Metroid and The Artful Escape, and those games were like
Mhm.
less than 10 hours long. But you know what they had? They had amazing art styles, great polish, like tight mechanics, gameplay, like interesting gameplay. Like the Artful Escape had a great plot. And to me, it's like if those games, like if Metroid was like 30 hours long and like drawn out, like that wouldn't be better just because it was longer. Like there's a lot more to games than just having a length of gameplay, especially with someone like me that likes to play a lot of different stuff and I'm constantly trying different experiences. Like I just really don't see. I mean, you got to get your value out of it, right? But to me, it's
Mhm.
like there's a lot of things I would prioritize over just simply hours played. You can just replay a short
Yeah.
game if you like it that much. You want to get your money out of it.
Absolutely. That is one of the things I put down, and I kind of tied it to also well, partially it's the length and yeah, padding. Like I don't think that's a quantifier of value. I absolutely 100% agree. And in fact, it's gotten to the point where like I'm busy. I have a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, and I don't have anywhere near the amount of time that I would like to have for gaming. And it genuinely puts me off these days when it's like, oh, this game's 200 hours. I don't have 200 hours, right? Like
Hmm.
I can't prioritize that, and or at least, like, if I do, that's the only game I'm gonna be playing for the next 6 months, so, that puts me off as well, and, like, some games it makes sense, and some games, that the length is a
Sure.
product of the game, but it shouldn't be a requirement, and I've tied that into I don't like the trend of everything having to be open world,
Yeah, that's another
um,
good one too.
and
Hmm.
I think those go together because open world has this connotation of being like, "Oh, it's, so much player freedom and agency
And
and, like,
immersion,
it's a
whatever
immersion
that
in a
means.
real
Whatever that
living,
means.
breathing world." And yes, open world absolutely can fulfill that kind of thing, like, you get dropped into something like Ghost of Tsushima or Red Dead Redemption 2, and, like, the worlds are amazing, but you know how much time the developers spent in Red Dead 2 making, like, realistic animal cycles and,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
the world exists outside of you and, like, the game is like, they put so much time and effort into making a real living world that exists without the player. So I'd say the open world is justified in
Right, and
that
it depends
sense.
what you're making, right? It just depends
But
if that's what you're going for.
yeah, exactly, but not every game actually benefits from having a big open world, and oftentimes you get these massive worlds and they're filled with nothing.
Hmm.
Because it's almost like that's like a checkbox that they had to fill out or, like, at least be able to say that it's open world as if, like,
Right.
as a marketing thing, and I genuinely like story-driven single player games that are linear. I don't think linear is a bad thing. I think it depends on what kind of experience you wanna tell. Like, think of, like you said, The Artful Escape and, like, think about the original BioShock and how great of a
Right,
game
yeah. Would that
that
be
is,
would that be
right?
better if it was like you're walking through a giant open world to get to those story moments with Fontaine and all that stuff? Like, no, not
Yeah,
really.
like, it doesn't work, right? Like, your character has a really time-sensitive goal that they need to accomplish, and if you're just like, "Oh, hang on, I've got I'm gonna go pick flowers for
I'm
this
gonna go
asshole
collect
over
these,
here,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I gotta go find 3 cats," and, like, no, like, that to me breaks my immersion because, okay, sure, I get to choose all these things, but it doesn't make sense that my character would choose that, and
Right.
I think developers need to be really careful about selecting like, player agency is a good thing. I like it in a lot of games, but I think you need to really think about what that means for the experience,
Hmm.
how it influences how a person's gonna play, what they're gonna do with that agency, and then decide if it actually is good or not. And it's not to say that you can't have, strong player choices or you can't have exploration in a linear game. Like BioShock is one of my favorite games to like, look at every little nook and cranny and explore because it's got an amazing world. But I'm still going from point A to point B at the end of the day. And that means that the developers can, they know I'm going to enter a room from this direction, which means they can have some set piece going on in the background
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
I'm going to have like I'm going to be the perfect audience for because I approached it in the way that
Right.
they
Yeah.
knew
Yeah.
I would,
Yeah. It's
and
a more bespoke experience based on like there's less I guess like diversity in terms of like how you can tackle stuff, and sometimes that's good, but then other times you're right, like I prefer that experience you're talking about too, where it is kind of laid out for you in a more intentional way.
yeah, exactly, and I think lately it's become the trend that, like, open world, good, linear, bad, must have player choice, otherwise game is bad, and I just think that they're both very powerful for different kinds of experiences, and I wanna see more, and we are getting more, like, story-driven single player RPGs
Hmm.
lately, and we
Hmm.
are kind of getting some games that do more of, like, at least not a super open world in terms of, like, you can do anything at any time, it's more like you're 3 options at a time, and so,
Right.
we're bridging that, and I think it's not all gone to shit, but I think there are definitely still some games where they're open for the sake of being open, and
Yeah, they
they're
don't
just
need to
filled
be,
with
right?
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that put me off like the original Horizon was like I just there was just too much to do, right? And I've recently like changed Ghost of Tsushima really made me change how I approach open world stuff because I used to really be like, "Oh my god, I have to do everything because if I miss something, I'm going to not have this great
Yeah.
experience, you know?" Whereas with Tsushima, I really was just like, "You know what? No. Screw it. I'm going to just mainline this. Like follow the golden path, do the story, treat it as if it is a linear experience, and then if I
Mhm.
want more or if I feel like I really am being compelled, then I go into the side stuff." And I had
Yep.
such a good time doing it that way. And I also played a game like one of my favorite open worlds is the Spider-Man games, which
Mhm.
I think some of the best because that is contextualized. Like, of course, it's an open world. Like, Spider Man takes care of New York. It makes sense that you have the open world of New York, but it's not enormous. Like, it's navigatable. It's not too overwhelming. And I did the same thing. Like, story mission, story mission, story mission. Oh, I kind of am interested in like these side quests. I'll go do these, and then it just adds. It's
Mhm.
not like I felt I was weighed down. Like I have to go. Oh, I have to go collect all these little drone races and find all this. Take these pictures, these different places before I don't do the story for 2 hours. That's not the experience I'm looking.
Yeah. And some of that
Like, it kinda in a way, it
is
sorta
user
comes
error,
down.
to be fair, like,
Yeah,
you don't have to do everything, right? Like, but,
yeah,
you feel compelled, and I think that that's maybe something to take into consideration when you're making a game, and it's like or I don't know. It's not their responsibility, and if it's in the game, you don't have to do it, and so it doesn't hurt you if it's there, but, like, it is
yeah,
distracting,
sure.
and, you know
Yeah, and I don't think either of us are really open world people, though, like, for the most part, I feel like they're pretty few and far between when we really get into that stuff. Um, I had one other really, like, I guess, negative point before I get into the positive ones. Wanna get through the
Mhm.
last little bit of negative Nancy stuff is I really don't like the trend, and I think everyone can, like, universally agree on this of, like, release a game and then fix it later through patches if it
Yeah.
wasn't ready. I think that's a really, like, really negative trend in the sense of being a consumer is like you shouldn't be the tester, right? Like there's some examples of games like Cyberpunk or like the new
Yep.
Avengers that have come out or like Anthem and those which is like this clearly was not ready and you're just releasing it because probably some shareholders were like nope this has to come out because we need to like get our revenue up for the quarter or whatever it is. And so you release it and then get your staff to crunch and like work on these fixes and then the reviews end up being shitty at the start because it doesn't work and the game just gets panned. And I just see it like there's such a clear other way to do this, right? Which is just call your game early access. Like Fortnite is still in early access.
Yeah.
Minecraft was in early access for years. That game came out in like 2009 or something, And those are two of the most successful games on the planet right now. And just because I think like that really helped out, like if something's early access and you're going in, you're like, hey, I expect there to be some glitches, right? I expect it not to work properly, 100%, but this is early access. I know what I'm getting into. Whereas if you're like, no, this game is coming out right now and it's clearly just not ready, like that's such a bad practice, man. And you're charging people full
Yeah.
price for something, and like the average consumer is not going to know that this game is going to come out with such a shaky start. Like they're going to the store expecting to buy a game that works. And I just think it's such a negative trend just because they're able to release these patches afterwards. Like you got to release a
Yeah.
product that's at least the baseline of what is going to work for your consumer.
Yeah. First of all, I'm floored that Fortnite is still in early access. That
I think
that
it's
blew
kind of
my
a
mind.
joke at the at
That
this
it's just
point,
gonna
right?
stay there
I
forever.
don't know, but I mean,
Um
there's a lot of examples. Those are just kind of the two that
Yeah, of
stuck
course.
out.
That's just I did not know that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I completely agree. And it's funny that like that's just accepted because like there's literally nothing else you'd ever buy in your life, or if it didn't
yeah,
work, you would not be like taking it back or like phoning customer service. And like sure, especially with like online and like service games, like it's not gonna be perfect early, right?
sure,
Like
sure.
it is you can do as many network tests as you want, and like it's tough to get everything working flawlessly for every single person. And so, like, I think that having the ability to day one patch is phenomenal and like it is a good thing, but absolutely it gets abused more than it gets used properly.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a
And
great thing, right? It's a blessing to have the ability to upgrade and make your game better after release, but I think there just needs to be a higher bar of like what's an acceptable state to release your game in. And I feel like there's
yeah.
very few examples of a game that comes out in a shitty state and then still gets like a great reception and does really well. Like you just get bad press for yourself, and then games that come out with a huge amount of polish or like at least they hit that baseline. I feel like it's like, wow, this is functioning really well and can't wait to see what gets added to it. And it's all positive and people end up liking it a lot more too.
Mhm. Yeah, it is genuinely just like trying to have their cake and eat it too. Like, oh shit, we don't want to delay it. Like we said pre-orders and that looks bad, so we'll just shove it out and we'll fix it,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever.
Hate it, man. I hate
Uh,
that stuff. But
ugh,
and that's all the
yeah.
negative stuff I had listed though.
Okay.
I'm glad we're past that, at least for
I've
me.
got one more negative, but it's definitely just a preference and just something kind of funny is I hate base building in games. Like, please stop making me craft and build a base. Like, I could not be less interested when games throw that kind of stuff in. Like, I remember playing Fallout 4 and being excited about it when that game came out. And you do like a few of the quests, and like, I never played a Fallout game. And so this is kind of aside from playing, like, a couple hours of 3, and so I was excited, like, this is gonna be my first Fallout, and, you get, like, a couple hours in, and then it's, like, main quest line, build a base, and every, like, 10 minutes, you're interrupted by some dude, and he's like, "Hey, have you built your base yet?" I'm like, "I'm out." Like, I just cannot be bothered, and, like, every game has a crafting system now, and, like, sometimes they're good and I like them, but we also talked about in Plague Tale about how you're, like, crafting all those items, but, like, you're always full of
Mhm,
materials
mhm.
and, like, it doesn't matter, you might as well just have access to them. And I
Yeah,
just feel like it's such a thing it's such like one of those checkbox things now where it's like, "Oh, we'll just, we'll put it in, people like this," or like, "We
yeah,
want them to
yeah.
explore, but we don't know why we want them to explore, so we'll crafting materials." That's,
Yeah, it's
the
like putting
simple
those
answer
things
for
in
that.
because you wanna click that checkbox like you said, and then not because
Mhm.
one of the designers was like, "Hey, this is actually gonna mechanically enhance our game." Like
Yeah.
I feel like The Last of Us is a good example of like the crafting in that game is quick and it is relevant. Like you're like, okay, on the fly, like how am I going to tackle this? Oh, what do I have in my inventory? Oh, I can make one nail bomb or something. So how am I going to tackle this? And I
Yes.
feel like that's really organic as opposed to like, hey, we have this big open world. What can you find in there? Oh, I guess crafting material. Like just like
Yeah.
you're saying, right? Like it's not. It totally depends how it's implemented. I'm
Yes,
so with
yeah,
you on
and
that.
in something and, like, Resident Evil is good for that too, because like, you get supplies and then it's like, "Well, I can craft bullets or I can craft healing," and, like, it's making you make choices and improvise and adapt on the fly, and that's
Hmm.
really interesting to have that control, but yeah, when it's just like, "Oh, I've made 50 of the same I'm just gonna sit here in inventory management for half an hour to, like, craft all this useless shit that I'll never use," like,
Yeah.
ugh, it just drives me nuts, and even in games where, like, that's one of the main mechanics, like, I hated why is Animal Crossing's crafting so bad? That's your whole game.
Oh man, I don't know.
So,
Yeah, I'm with you
yeah.
though. Not everything needs crafting. Not everything needs cooking. Not everything needs base building and all that stuff. I totally agree. I think that speaks to like we're not just open world people as well for the most part, right? Like those
I
are like
guess
largely
so.
open world mechanics.
They are large overall mechanics, but I respect it in some cases, like, yeah, Resident Evil and, Last of Us and, like, certain games do it well. Like, if resources are scarce and they're meaningful,
Hmm.
then crafting is interesting.
Yeah,
If you're just bombarded with them all the time, it's a chore, and
that's how I felt in
there
Plague Tale, right?
there's
Like I
a
felt like, what's the
balance.
point? I have so many of these things.
Yeah.
Just give me the ammo. Yeah.
Mhm.
I want to bring up some positive trends. Let's
Okay,
get
yeah,
happy about
let's do
this.
positive.
Okay, here's my positive trend, and this is one that's like, wow, we talk about dreams a lot on this show, right? And how cool we think it is, and we've agreed we're both going to pick it up, ironically on a sale when we're talking about stuff
Yeah,
like that.
that's right.
But I think one of the most positive trends in games is creation games, and I
Mhm.
think like people love to bag on like Minecraft and it's like the meme game because kids are annoying on YouTube and there's some really annoying like stuff like that. But I think like what like Minecraft and even Fortnite and games like Dreams and Roblox and all these games like they're games in Minecraft, like whatever, you can play the single player, but really the beauty of why that's so popular is because you can make all your different game modes in it. And you can do the same in Roblox and Fortnite. You can make your own lab games and have your own custom objectives and do your stuff. And Dreams, people are literally making like proper games. And I just think that these platforms, like Mario Maker is another one, people can make their own
Yep,
Mario
Mario
levels.
Maker.
And it's so cool that stuff like game design, which is like previously like 10 years ago even was like gated off to only people that understand programming and whatnot. Whereas now like anyone can buy any one of those games I just listed and start making their own stuff, and it can be quality like depending if you put your time into it. And I think that's just such a really cool evolution of like games are now also kind of game creation tools. And I love to see that because it just expands creativity to such a wider audience of people. And you never know like who might have a really cool idea for a game, but they just don't have the technical skills. But now they can buy something like Dreams or Minecraft and like literally make it.
Mhm. I think that is probably the best point, and probably I don't think we're gonna touch on anything better. I love this trend. It's amazing, like, I thought of just creativity in general, like, I feel like we've had so many unique and different games, and, like, the indie scene is so booming right now,
Hmm.
and that it's kind of like a subsection of that, I suppose, right? It's just, like, there's more access for people and more of a platform for their games to get seen
Hmm.
now in the last, like, 10 years, and so, like, we do, like, Nintendo's indie specific showcases, right? Like, that's something that gets traction, and, like, we had, like, Hades get I mean, I guess Supergiant isn't super small, but, like,
Sure, but still indie studio though.
they're winning, like, awards over AAA games, and it's just so nice to see so many passion projects come out, and we're not in that, like, muddy, everything's dark and gritty and brown and a shooter and, like, you know, we're getting some really interesting stuff, and I think having those creation games only fuels that more because you get these people who wouldn't normally be going into game design,
Hmm.
getting their feet wet in something like Dreams, and
Right.
then going on to create a game outside of that.
Right. Or I mean, even if they don't, they're still making something. Like I could see a future
Yes.
where later in the PS5 life cycle, it's like, okay, you're going to the PlayStation store, what are you looking for? You got your AAA stuff here, you tab over and there's
Mhm.
the indie stuff here, and then you can tab over again. And it's like, what if they sold the games made in Dreams just for like $1 and
Yeah.
you could just buy them even if you don't have Dreams and play them independently. Like that would be such a cool future to live in.
Mhm. Absolutely. That is I like that a lot. It's very good. That's better than the dumb joke answers I put down.
No, no, seriously. What did you put?
I was like, "Oh, we're getting a lot of Souls likes."
We are getting a lot of those. That's a huge
We are
trend.
getting a lot of them. It is a big trend.
You know,
Not all of them are good.
No, well, it's like a hot
Um,
thing, right? Like I feel like since
thing.
over the last 10 years or so, I feel like Dark Souls has gone from like a very niche thing that very few are interested in to like it's one of the biggest games on the planet now, and it
Yeah.
only makes sense that people will mimic that and try to do their own take on it.
Mhm. Absolutely, and it's, like, it's so nice to see all these, like, the Reddit's always like, "I just beat this boss for the first time," and, like, the community is so lovely and encouraging. But, yeah, like, for me personally, it's like, I can just there is an abundance of them, and they're not all good, and they're not all, none of them are quite like, the originals, but I like this trend. I want it to continue. We can have as many like Hades style action roguelikes as we want. We can have as many Souls likes as
Yeah.
we want.
Yep.
I'm not tired of them. But again, it has that creativity. People are doing such interesting things with them. Like I picked up Returnal because someone compared it to Dark Souls for me. And Returnal is like it's like an alien sci-fi bullet hell game. And it's so incredibly different, but like it springboarded off of that to a degree.
Sure.
And, there's something to be said about, like, it's games stagnating and, they're all the same and there's like 35,000 clones of games. But at the same time, like people are taking those ideas and making really unique games based off of that framework, right? Because nothing gets
Yeah.
built in a
It's the
vacuum.
nature of art. Like everything is iterative. You can
Mhm.
take any game and it's going to have pieces of something else in it. Like it has to, right? Like someone created a
Yeah.
health bar for the first time. Like every game is going to have that, you know?
That's true.
It's
That's true. I think the other thing I wanted to point out that I like is that we're getting a lot of games that aren't necessarily like quote unquote games. We're getting a lot of pieces that are like experiences and more like art pieces. And you think of games like Journey, where like, yeah, there's mechanics, you need to make jumps and you're controlling things, but it's very much meant to be, like, more of an artistic piece
yeah.
than anything
Yeah.
else, and, like, you get, like, interactive story games, and you get games that are, like, basically just, like, cutscenes and movies, and you get ones that are just, all the visual novel dialogue kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and I like that those it's expanded to, like, a broader idea of what constitutes as a video game and how you can tell a story, and I don't feel like we used to get tons of those
Yeah,
before.
it was like story and mechanics, right? And I think now it's just like
Mhm.
there's a certain group of developers that obviously probably grew up with old Fallout and stuff and they're like, "Hey, these stories are interesting. What if we just focused our time in writing a story and we just made it interactive and there wasn't as much focused on on the mechanics and what that that's so true. I think that's a good trend and like even it makes me think of stuff like there was that like Matrix experience, which was basically just like checking out whatever they'd made in 4K. It wasn't
Mhm.
even real. It was like tied in with a movie or something. I remember a couple months ago, and like that's not even really a
Mhm.
game, but it's just a cool type of thing you can experience through a video game console, right? Or like that there was that Tool album that came out or something like that experience. I forget what it was now, but it's just like non-game stuff that's still a game, quote unquote. I think you're so right. Very cool.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
one thing that I put down, and this made me came up in my mind from the Nintendo Direct we just watched and the Ezio trilogy that just came out. I'm really enjoying the trend, and maybe this isn't like a recent trend, but of like how many remakes and remasters we're getting these days. I think it's a really good thing, and I feel it's a bit of a
Mhm.
controversial point because a lot of people are like, well, I would rather they put out something new than a remaster or like something I've played before. And to some extent that's true. Like I would rather have a new game if it's something I've played before a lot of the time too. But I think what's missed in that is number one, a lot of the time, a lot of these remakes and remasters are not done by the original studio. So it's not like it's taking their resources away.
Yes.
There's like other studios that are remaking it, or the original studio has made enough profit and grown because of how successful their games are that they can have a separate team that is working on the remake while they
Mhm.
also work on something new. So you're not missing out as a fan. It's only growing. And I feel like as gamers, right? Like there's something like inherently um normal about like sharing games. Like, I remember being kids and like we'd be watching over each other's shoulders when we're playing games.
Mhm.
And to me it's like that's a really cool experience like sharing something I love with someone else. So in the same way like I'm thinking of the Mass Effect trilogy that just got remastered last year or like the Dead Space remake that's coming out next or like whenever that comes out next year this year. Like sure I've played that before, but I'm excited for people that haven't played that to go back and play something that I really like. And I would rather have that experience and share that with people and get more people into what I like rather than selfishly get like, a new Dead Space game a couple years quicker or something.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and, like, it is a controversial opinion, but I'm with you 100%, like, we had a good talk about that on, I think, our last news episode,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's so exciting, and there's so many games that you miss out on or you don't have the opportunity to play, and so many games are difficult to find, like, there's not an ease of access for a lot
Mhm,
of older
mhm.
games, and so, even if it's just a port to a new console, that helps, but just going that extra mile
Mhm.
to have a remaster or a remake and just bringing it into, something that feels a little bit more modern
Right.
is nice, and so many of them I feel like are done with, like, love and care, like, the argument is always like, "Oh, it's just a lazy way to make money," like, "That's not
Yeah.
creative, they just remade something," but it's like,
That's just a
it's
cynical way to
special,
look at
right?
it though, I
It's
think.
cynical, like, it's special for a lot of people. A lot of people want to be able to play, a nostalgic game in a new light with a new coat of paint, and, like, a lot of them are done so well, like, they're adding, like, motion control flight controls to
Yeah, yeah.
some of, like, when you were doing the plane in Assassin's Creed, and it's like, you didn't have to do that, And I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of them, like, the majority of the games that are getting remastered, at least the big ones, do not feel like, cheap, easy money. They're putting a lot of time and effort into them,
Yeah.
but
Well, I think a lot
and
of
they're
people lose it too. They're like, "Oh, sorry to cut you off," but
that's okay.
it's not like the company's just like, "Oh, we're gonna put the disc in for this game and push the port button, and then it will come out and be for PS5." Like, there's a lot of work that gets put into this stuff. It's not like
Yeah.
they just like easily do it. They would do it for every game if they could just do it that quickly. They would make tons more money.
Yeah, and even if it was that easy, like, that's still only a positive thing, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think this is the bad trend that this is my last negative trend I've thought of while we've been talking about this is how, um like, just selfish game communities can be
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
like, that's always the joke, right? Like, you watch Nintendo Direct, and it's like, you see, like, 30 games that are really exciting, and it's like, all the comments are like, "But where is Zelda?" But
Yeah,
where's the
right, right,
one
right.
game I was looking for? And, like, of course, like, you wanna see the game, like, I went through Elden Ring hell, like, I'm still waiting on goddamn Silk Song, like, I
Sure.
know I know what that feels like. You're excited, you get your hopes up for something, but, like, I just think, like, there's value in things existing that aren't for you, and there's value in, like, diversity, and there's value in people being able to have all these options for what they wanna play, and I think remasters and remakes are the ultimate, like, example of that in the sense of, like, "Oh,
Mhm.
well, I've already played this, so this
Yeah, it
is
doesn't matter
useless
for
for me to
me.
have another Dead Space," and it's like, but so many people haven't, and this is so exciting,
Yeah,
right?
well, a clear example for it is like there's a lot of people that would say Shadow of the Colossus is one of the best games ever made, and like it's a PS2 classic and it still holds up. And I don't think any of that's untrue. Like it is a great game, but that's an example of like, as I said, I played Dead Space. I'm excited for people that haven't to go and try that new one. Like I hadn't played
Mhm.
Shadow of the Colossus. And what's the likelihood of me going back to plug in my PS2 to find an old copy to go do it? Like I'm not going to do that. But I loved
Mhm.
playing the remastered version, and now when people bring up that argument of like, oh, it's one of my favorite games of all time, like I played it back on the PS2, I'm like, man, I wish I had that experience playing it when it came out, but I have played the remaster, and I totally agree with you that it's a fun game. Or and have like a
Mhm.
touchstone to go back and play that older stuff. It's just it's such an important thing, I think, and like you can get into the whole preservation of games argument too. A little different, I guess, if you're remaking stuff, but it's still a way to access that older total like catalog of different games. Very cool. I don't know. We're running a little long here, Kate. We got an hour 22. I don't know if you just want to rapid fire through the rest. I got a few more to go through for myself, which I really wanted to bring up, but maybe I'll just touch
Okay.
on them quick.
Sure,
Um,
you go for it.
yeah, sure. So I really like the trend of games becoming more like multi-platform, I guess. We talked about
Mhm.
consolidation and how it's bad in one way, but on the other hand, there's a trend of like PlayStation's finally putting some of its games on PC, and Xbox is putting Game Pass on PC. And why do we have to keep it just at the PlayStation console? Like let's put everything on PlayStation on PC. I get not wanting to put on an Xbox, but like being on PC at least, it's a great thing. More people are going to get to play great games, so let's keep that going. My other trend that I really liked was I really think like licensed games are making a really good comeback. I know there's like a horrible stereotype in games of like every licensed game is shit, and like let's point out all the bad Game Boy Advance and Wii games as shovelware, like just slap a license on and it sucks. But if you think about it, like we have the Spider-Man games for Insomniac, those are great. The Witcher is a licensed product. Like I really enjoyed the South Park Stick of Truth RPGs. Batman Arkham is like the quintessential like modern, revered license game. I really think there's a lot of good license games that are coming out
Yeah.
these days, and like I know Marvel's Avengers was bad and all that, and there's tons of examples you
Yeah.
can probably pick out, but I think in general they're on the upswing, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I completely agree. Shout out to Midnight Suns looks so good
Yeah,
too.
yeah, totally.
Um, but yeah, I think that's true, and it also ties into, like, we're getting some, like, movie stuff,
Hmm.
in that same kind of vein that's actually pretty decent. Like, I really enjoyed Detective Pikachu,
Yeah.
and I know that, like, Pokemon's already a franchise that's, like, it's not just games, it is, like, a big multimedia franchise, but we're getting other stuff, like, we're getting about, like, the Last of Us TV show looks like it's gonna be so good, and, like, I know the Uncharted movies had some,
Some
struggles, but, like, some questionable choices in reviews, but I'm still gonna go see it, and, like, Castlevania, that animated
man, that
show
was
looks
so good.
absolute fire, like, we are getting, and, like, I knew the Bungie's talked about, like, doing some Destiny stuff, like, we are getting, to see, like, universes and worlds we love in other forms of media as well, which I am
Hmm.
really excited for, and, like, we're still kind of in that era of, like, video game movies are shit, but we're moving towards, this one's actually
There's some
pretty
glimmers of hope in
decent.
there, right? There's some
Yeah,
glimmers of hope.
like
I can't wait for the
yeah,
Last of Us TV show. That's gonna be
exactly. We're
fantastic,
we're
hopefully.
we're kind of we haven't crossed the boundary yet, but we're at the door. We're
Mhm.
knocking, and we're gonna get through eventually.
Exactly. I hope so. I had one more positive trend that I really like, and then I'm tapped as far as what I came up with, which is that there's a trend. Like I know like accessibility is becoming a big thing.
Mhm.
I think it's like only for the better, really. Um, Obviously, but one thing in particular that I really like, and it's come to my attention like a lot recently because I've been playing Forza on Xbox, really enjoying it, is I love this trend of like games including rewind features. And like in Forza, if you make a mistake, and some people would hate this, right? The people that are like, no, you have to get good and you only can do it this one way, and fuck you if you like want to do it a different way than I play. But like in Forza, you can rewind, right? So if I spin off the road and like take a corner way too fast and fuck up, you can just hold, I guess it's Y on the Xbox, look over at my controller, and it like rewinds to a certain point in the race, and you can like redo that one section. And I know it's like the purists are going to be like, well, your race time doesn't count now because you can just go back and edit whenever you make a mistake. But you know what? No one's actually going to play that way. Like if you want to rewind every time you make one mistake, like it's going to be like a 5-hour race. Like so you're going to be there for a long
Yeah,
time.
you're gonna optimize the fun out of it.
Yeah, but for someone like me, it's like that's a fun feature because Forza is kind of skirting that line between Burnout Arcade, which I really love, and like the Gran Turismo really realistic stuff. So I'm really learning like exactly how to play. And for me, it's like I'm pretty good, but if I mess up one corner, it's so much more appealing just to rewind that and try and redo it than like come in last on a race and have to redo it or like click restart when I'm already 2 out of 3 laps in, like it just makes it so much easier for someone to get in. And then I've been using it less and less because allowed me to practice on the fly instead of like being discouraged having to restart all the time. And it's the same thing for like the Nintendo Online, like when you get the Super Nintendo, the
Mhm.
NES, like those games have like built-in rewind features as well
Yeah,
from
they do.
Nintendo. And like for me, like I went and played, I don't know, like you can go back and play some of those old games on there and like they're hard as nails, right? Because it's built on a live system and like it's a short game, so they want you to be able to replay it a bunch because you got to die a lot and like start levels from the start. And like for me, it's like I don't have interest in doing that, but if I can go for an hour and like if I have an unfair death in Super Mario World, just rewind it and keep going, like I'll actually get to the end of the game. I'll get to see the end of it and not be put off and actually get to experience the whole thing. And I
Right,
just
which
think
you would
that's
not have done
which I wouldn't have done
otherwise.
otherwise. And if people are going to talk up some of these old games of being like so good, like sure I could sit there for like 3 times as long as I did and like pound my way through it, but like that's not fun. It's just gonna put me off. Then I won't play it, and my experience will be like, oh, that game isn't so great. But now I can be like, you know what? For what it was, it's a good thing. Like I made it through using this. If I ever wanted to play it again, maybe I would try not using that feature. But at least I've experienced it. At least I've been able to go back. And so those are kind of like two
Mhm.
different examples of how I just think those functions are fantastic, and and like just make it so much more accessible to play stuff that you otherwise wouldn't.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree, and not just even that, but yeah, just all accessibility features, right?
Yeah.
Like, get colorblind modes in every single thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
get proper, like, subtitles for people who are not playing with sound, and,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
make every game you should be able to customize your controls because
Oh,
whatever's
no doubt
comfortable
about
for
it.
you, right? Like,
That's one thing
these are
Nintendo
things that,
sucks
like
for.
yeah, these are things that, like, are kind of becoming no-brainers, and we're almost
Yeah.
at the point now where it's like, it's weird if a game doesn't have it, and
Yeah,
that's
it's
good, and
shocking,
there's
I
so
think,
many other
honestly.
features that could be in that no-brainer, and we've talked about this before, and,
Mhm.
there's we don't necessarily see eye to eye on every aspect of it, but in
Sure,
general,
sure.
like, accessibility features are very, very positive,
Yeah,
and it's nice that it's at least a discussion people are having, and it's something that we're looking at.
totally, yeah, totally. But anyway, yeah, those are my trends. I feel like I prepared for this one pretty late, but I was like, "Man, I got a big list."
I mean, there's a lot to talk about,
Yeah.
absolutely, and whatever constitutes as a trend or not, but it's
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
to look back and see how things have changed over time.
Yeah, I'm glad that neither of us brought up, like, loot boxes and all that stuff. I feel like those are, like, played out trends now, like, there's more stuff to talk about.
Yeah,
But, yeah, if you would like to write in and tell us what your favorite gaming trends are, or if you disagree with anything we've brought up and you think
especially if
we're
it's loot boxes.
yeah, you think we're dumb because, we like any of these things or vice versa. If you think that games, licensed games still suck, write in. If you think remasters, remakes are a bad use of time, write in. If you disagree that any of these things, or disagree, whatever, let us know. Circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear what people have as their takes on different trends as well too, because as much as
Mhm.
we laid out a lot, there's just like endless information on this and like stuff we would never think of because we don't play certain games and all that. So yeah, I'd love to hear from that. Again, if you want to leave us a review, if you like our content, please do so over on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening. Much appreciated as always. Kate and I are actually going to get around to recording the lost character tier list for
It's
CNS Extra.
happening.
It's actually
We
happening.
have to go back.
We have to go back. We've got it scheduled in for this week, so look forward to that. Probably later this week, early next week. Maybe it'll be bonus for over the weekend next week. Keep your eyes open, folks. But anyway, enjoy the episode. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see everyone again on the next one.